Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here. Good afternoon. And a very warm welcome to all of you on this momentous occasion, really, of the celebration of the 200th anniversary of the birth of the merchant prophet of Shiraz, the Bab. The title of the talk today is The Gate of the Heart. His name, the Bab, means the gate, and is the subject of our celebration today. This is truly a festive occasion, a festive event in which I wish that all of you would be able to enjoy yourselves, meet new people and old friends in this occasion, and take a lot of good memories with you. How marvelous that we gather here today to celebrate through this magnificent, immersive experience that the Menlo Park community has created for you, the life, the teachings, and the impact of this youthful Persian prophet of Shiraz, the Bab. Our celebration is shared today by like-minded individuals all over the world, from Boston to Beijing, from London to Lima, from Milan to Manila, from Tashkent to Tehran, from Vancouver to Vanuatu, from Chicago to Shiraz. Worldwide, in every corner of the world today, on this planet, diverse peoples of every color and every denomination are gathering to celebrate the short yet eventful life of one of the most remarkable figures to have ever walked on this planet. Let us take a journey together to the times of the Bab and examine with the aid of history and a little bit of our imagination the impact that his teachings had on countless people throughout these years and have brought us together in Silicon Valley in this room today. Let us travel back in time, some 200 years to the middle of the 19th century. In the middle of the 19th century, Europe was firmly in the midst of two revolutions. One, you all know, the Industrial Revolution, but it was also the bourgeois democratic revolution. Colonization was fast at work. China was experiencing one of the darkest periods of her history and grappling with the effects of the Opium War and national humiliation, the like of which they had not witnessed. And America was in the bonds of slavery, with some states ratifying exclusion laws as late as middle of the 19th century. A massive worldwide messianic movement had also swept the planet, both in the West and in the East. German Templars had established a colony at the foot of Mount Carmel in the Holy Land in anticipation of the imminent coming of the promised Christ. The Christian world was teeming with prophecies of the end of times and the return of the Messiah, from the Millerites to the Seventh-day Adventists, and many more. In the Middle East, the expectations of the return of the Promised One had reached unprecedented ferment. The Shiites, the Sunnis, the Shaykhis, and more were all expecting the times of the end. The day of resurrection, they called it, with all the spectacle, pomp and glory that their imaginations had allowed them to believe. Our story takes us to Persia, the ancient empire of the Cyrus the Great. The ruins of the magnificent city of Persepolis that you see here remind the visitors of the glory days of an empire that stood for justice, for equity, and inclusion some 2,500 years earlier, a time of true enlightenment. A short distance from the ancient capital of the world civilization is the city of Shiraz. You're all familiar maybe with the great grapes and the wine, but the city is here. Here in this city of the intoxicated poets of Hafez and Sa'di, our story begins. Shiraz, with its ever spring weather, laid back people, and flower-filled boulevards was a place of inspiration and love. But Persia of the 19th century had lost its luster. Poverty, corruption, disease were everywhere. Lustful and weak kings, under the yoke of the clergy, had lost massive territories to foreign powers. The populace, largely uneducated and deeply suffering from prejudice and superstition, had all but lost their dignity. It was far removed from the glory days of ancient Persia. Ignorance prevailed, senseless dogmas went unchallenged. Religion was devoid of its animating spirit at the hands of the corrupt clergy. Disillusionment and hopelessness prevailed. Oppression was complete. It was here, in one of the small alleys of this quaint town, Shiraz, that a young merchant of only 25 years of age, the Bab, invited a student of religion with messianic ardor in his heart to enter his home one evening through this gate. He said, "Enter therein in peace, secure." He directed his esteemed guest up into his courtyard and up a set of stairs into the upper chamber of his modest house. The host, the Bab, in his most gentle and hospitable manner, washed the dust of the road off of his guest's feet, attended to his every need, and then he simply began a conversation. As a youthful host, the Bab heard the description of the Promised One and the longings of the heart of this young guest. He paused, and in his genteel manner, he exclaimed, "Observe, observe attentively. Might not the person intended be none other than I?" With that simple yet profound sentence, the Bab began to release forces that was destined to reshape and remake human affairs till today. The words spoken by the Bab that evening pierced the pure heart of that young guest as he sat spellbound and witnessed the swiftness with which his esteemed host started to write verses extolling the virtues of that night and the dawn of a new day awaiting humanity. It was on this very night, in this very room, referring allegorically to the prophet Joseph, that the Bab described that humanity has finally arrived at a precipice, that the age of prophecy and expectation has finally come to an end, and a new age of fulfillment has dawned. He exclaimed that a new divine teacher, as a new divine teacher, he stands not only as a messenger of God, but his mission was also to be regarded as a prelude to a new chapter of hope for humanity. The gate, he called himself, through which the one greater than him will come to unite mankind under one common cause. Whenever divine educators in every age appear in the world, we witness seismic forces that transform society and come to shape human thought and action for centuries to come. They are pivotal moments that propel the advancement of civilization, whether they be Muhammad, Moses, Christ, Baha'u'llah, and the Bab. With the appearance of each, the radius of human cooperation expands, from the clan to the tribe, to the city, and finally to the nation. And each of these great teachers promise that in time, another divine great leader will come, who would reform the world and expand our radius to the entire planet. That was the evening of May 23rd, 1844, a few hours past sunset in Shiraz. Halfway around the world in America, just around the same hour, Samuel Morse, the inventor of the telegraph, sent his first message from Washington to Baltimore, which said, "What hath God wrought?" It is no wonder then that since that fateful night, much like the times of the previous prophets, forces were released for the realization of the mission of the Bab. The telegraph was just the prelude to a century and a half of explosive scientific and technological discoveries that have made our world much smaller and have created the possibilities for the first time to consider that the true unity and oneness of mankind is at long last a real possibility and in our grasp. The message of the Bab and his claim was weighty indeed. His writings flowed profusely. This here is in his own handwriting, disclosing profound truths. His summons were clear. He dismissed superstition, urged people to recognize the urgency and the significance of the times, castigating the hypocrisy of the leaders, whether they be religious or secular, and summoning the world to an exalted standard of conduct. His call swept across all of Persia and even beyond with unprecedented speed. Young and old, learned and illiterate, city dwellers and villagers, men and women, from every walk of life were attracted to his message. Observers were astonished at the vast swelling numbers and deeds of unsurpassed bravery and devotion. Chief among his early believers was the peerless figure of Tahirih, a poetess supreme. She was a learned woman who sparred with most erudite men of her time. Her tongue was lucid, and her proofs were decisive. At the darkest hours for women in her society, in fact, the darkest hours for women in most societies around the world, to the bewilderment of all men present, Tahirih unveiled herself in public, announcing at once the dawn of the new day for humanity and the emancipation of women as equal partners in building the foundations of this new world order. The Bab's appearance was like a spring storm. It uprooted the withered and tired customs of the past. It washed away the obscuring dust off the eyes of the people. He prepared the people for the imminent appearance of the one whose advent the world had been awaiting. This was his insistent theme. The clergy was, of course, alarmed. They persecuted and brutally murdered thousands of his adherents, who readily endured unimaginable hardship with heroism in the path of their newly found conviction. Much like the life of Christ, some 2 millennia before him, the clergy could not fathom the awesome message of the youthful new prophet and concocted with the king to arrest the Bab, sending him from city to city and finally to the remotest mountains in order to silence his voice. Yet his message persisted. In a short span of only 6 years, much of Persia and the neighboring regions were swept by the message of the Bab. At last, again Christ-like, he was sentenced by the clergy to death in the city of Tabriz. As the midday sun of that hot day in July of 1850 approached, the Bab was asked to present himself to be executed in this square by a firing squad. He said, "I have yet to complete my conversation with my companion." Conversations were important. He said, "No force on this planet will be able to prevent me from that mission." He was nonetheless forced to the execution square, and before the eyes of multitudes, over 10,000 onlookers and foreign visitors, the regiment of 3 files of soldiers discharged their rifles. As the smoke-filled sky began to clear, the unbelieving masses saw that the Bab was not to be found. Their search led them to the same chamber where he was still conducting his conversation. He said, "I have finished my words now. You may take me and do as you please." The first regiment ran away. They refused to carry out this weighty task. And another one readied itself and put the young prophet of Shiraz to death in the hopes that this will quench his light and end his message. Yet, that conversation continues to the present day. The Bab's message set his native land on fire. A large number have gravitated to the teachings of the new faith. The hallmark of their belief was the freedom of the individual to investigate the truth for themselves, independently, and follow the dictates of their spirit, and not investigate it through and submit themselves to the corrupt clergy. Total equality and the emancipation of women was declared, and a firm resolve to arise to build the essentials of a new, ever-advancing civilization on this earth had been instilled among his believers. The coming of age of the human race had finally arrived. Soon after the public execution of the Bab, amidst continuous persecutions, another native of his land, who assumed the title of Baha'u'llah, meaning the glory of God, claimed that he was in fact the one promised by the Bab, and that his mission was none other than to bring about the ultimate unity of the entire human race. Baha'u'llah's claim also cost him banishment and imprisonment, and like all the prophets of the past. He was jailed for more than 40 years and banished from his homeland from city to city, arriving in the pestilential prison city of Akka in the Holy Land, where he prophetically was placed, where all major Abrahamic religions had their roots. He remained a prisoner until his passing in 1892. The Bab and Baha'u'llah, as twin manifestations, broke with tradition. Theirs was a mission to raise a new race of man who would, by the power of their faith and their daily exertions, strive to build a better world freed from prejudice and advancing toward a new world order. These twin divine educators, whose birthdays we observe as one festival, inaugurated a new age in social evolution, the age of the unification of the entire human race. The spiritual energies they released infused a new life in every sphere of human endeavor. Sufficient witness to that is the astounding advances in science and technology since their appearance. The gate to the accumulated knowledge of humanity has been flung open. Today, the teachings of these twin teachers are widely accepted for the upliftment of society everywhere in the world. That humanity is one, that women are equal to men, that education must be universal, that truth must be rationally investigated across the world. Everywhere, larger and larger populations accept these teachings and put them to practice. But for the ideas to take root in society, they require the force of spiritual commitment. It is one thing to believe in a principle, quite the other to embrace it wholeheartedly and implement it in society and refashion social order. Today, the Baha'i communities everywhere in the world strive to put these teachings into daily practice. Their aim is to focus the light on the chronic problems that afflict society. And together with their communities, they devise practical programs of action based on these spiritual principles. Baha'i communities strive to champion the education of both girls and boys, subscribe to the extended concept of work performed in the spirit of service as worship, look to the spiritual aspirations rather than self-centered desires as the driving force for human progress. In summary, they strive to bring about the spiritual, social, and material progress of humanity. In the words of one sage, treading the spiritual path with practical feet. Above all principles, Baha'is define themselves by their commitment to oneness of humanity. They value the rich diversity of mankind, of course, while maintaining one's identity as a member of the human race above all identities. They affirm the need for a global consciousness and count all members of the human family as their own. But Baha'is are not simply content with thoughts and belief, nor even with their actions to make the world a better place. They invite lovingly and genuinely like-minded souls to join them in this conversation. It all started with a conversation. And to put these teachings into effect. They recognize that there are many noble and admirable causes in the world, and countless noble people of different backgrounds are striving to advance them. They note that these efforts must also have the spiritual impetus to transform the human heart. As they strive to do this, neighborhood by neighborhood, they learn together in their communities ways in which to implement the divine principles of these twin teachers in addressing the acutest maladies of our society. Let us remind ourselves of that heroic time of the Bab, the multitudes that recognized him. They were summoned to acts of heroism and sacrifice, and their magnificent responses were all recorded in history already. Today, the call of these twin divine teachers is for selfless and steadfast service to humanity. That is our heroism for the present age. Therefore, as you go about the rest of your day today, as you visit this magnificent exhibition and the immersive recreation or recreation of that house of the ball, imagine yourself walking through this back alleys, small alleys of the city of Shiraz, until you are standing at the gate of this house. The gate is there. As you gaze at this door, at this gate, I want to invite you to imagine the young merchant prophet of Shiraz, the Bab, entering with his inquisitive guest through that door that symbolizes his mission, the gate of the heart. Let your mind enter into that courtyard and go up those stairs into the upper chamber, into that home, that room. There, you may pause and take a moment to ponder the forces at play since that fateful night in May 1844. You may remind yourself of how it all started with a simple conversation in this room. You may take inspiration from that question of the Bab. Look to your left, look to your right. Look to find an old friend, or maybe make a new one. Take it all in. And maybe you could also start a conversation and say, might not the intended people for building a better world be none other than us?
That was great. I have goosebumps. Thank you so much. Wow. Well, I've been instructed, I've made a new friend, Shane, you'll be happy to know. And she says, you're introducing everyone, but we don't really know who you are, so would you mind introducing yourself? So I apologize. Hello, everyone. Hello. My name is Deanne LaRue, and I'm from Marin County in San Rafael, working together with a team of folks here today. So thank you for making me say my name, Deanne. Next, we'll introduce our next musical composition, and I love this title so much. It's called As One Soul. So it's a perfect coming off of this beautiful address we just had. And the thing that makes this musical composition so incredible is that, well, I like to call it a musical call to action, which is what our keynote address is asking us to do here today, to use our lives as a call to action. Because it's one thing to